Warning, the following video includes spoilers for both Persona 5 Royal and I guess also kind of Persona 3 FES. So if you haven't played either of those games, well, one, Persona 3 FES came out like fucking how many years ago? Get on that already. And also, proceed with caution. You have to look at .xx here, and welcome to what's kind of a redo of a video that I made a while ago that was basically called, I think it was called like Why Persona 5 Royal Works as a Sequel to Strikers, which may be the worst video title of all time. So, and also it was maybe one of my worst videos ever because it's a complete nightmare and all over the place, and I clearly don't have a fucking clue what I'm talking about. So now that I'm a little bit more well informed on the franchise and, well, just things in general, I guess, I decided, you know, why not go back and redo this video, because it is still something that I believe needs to be discussed, and, you know, hopefully I can make it a slightly fucking better video this time. So yeah, if you haven't caught on yet, the original video was my discussion about how Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 Strikers have a lot of controversy over their canonicity. So let's start off with a little bit of backstory. For those who, for some reason, are watching this video and aren't aware, Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 Strikers were announced at the same time and were the first real follow-ups to Persona 5. Shut up! Those two don't count. The characters don't really grow at all in them, and while they are canon, the characters don't fucking remember them after they happen, so therefore they don't count. Anyway, they were the first real follow-ups to Persona 5. Persona 5 Royal being an enhanced re-release in the same vein as Persona 4 Golden or Persona 3 FES, and Persona 5 Strikers was a Dynasty Warriors style spin-off game that took place a few months afterwards. So far so good, right? Well, that's where it gets complicated. See, because these games were in development at the same time, Atlus had a choice to make. They could either have the teams exchange notes to keep Strikers' story in line with Royal's, or they could decide to just have Strikers be a sequel to Royal. Or sorry, just have Strikers be a sequel to Vanilla. And they actually ended up going with the latter, stating that the reason was they wanted people to be able to pick up Strikers whether they played Vanilla Persona 5 or Persona 5 Royal. Seems like a pretty decent reason to do it, especially considering they were going to be coming out around at the same time. I think they only released a few months apart in Japan. Over here, they released about a year apart. But here's the thing. People have taken this statement that they decided to make Strikers more of a sequel to Vanilla so that it could be accessible to all players completely the fuck out of context. And it's led to a debate that just refuses to end, where people genuinely believe that these two games take place in separate timelines. Now, I'm very obviously of the opinion that these two games of course take place in the same timeline. There is nothing stopping these two games from taking place in the same timeline, and I'm going to show you all my evidence for that now. So let's get this out of the way first. Atlus never straight up said that Strikers and Royal are not in the same timeline. That was never something they said. People think they said that because a lot of journalists, for some reason, reported on the original claim and took it way the fuck out of context, and that's led to this whole debate. Atlus never actually said that these games do not take place in the same timeline. And it wouldn't really make sense for them to say that either, because they were coming out around at the same time. Why would you straight up say, hey, this one isn't canon, so but still buy it? You know what I mean? That wouldn't really make any fucking sense. So that's a key one, is that everyone's just going off of something that Atlus never actually said. The second main thing I want to bring up is that look at the history of the Persona series, or even the Megami Tensei series in general, and their re-releases. Re-releases are nothing new to Megami Tensei. It's all started with Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne Maniacs Edition, which, in all fairness, for a long time was the only version of Nocturne we had over here, so I wouldn't actually be surprised if you didn't know about that one. You know the version that added Dante? Yeah, that was actually a re-release, funnily enough. And then they actually later on got a third re-release called Maniacs Chronicle that replaced Dante with Vital Kuzunoha, which we didn't get until like 10 years ago. Anyway, that's not the point. The Persona series has also gotten several of these, such as Persona 3 FES, Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Golden, and of course, Persona 5 Royal. Persona 1 and 2 also kind of got them, but they're kind of different. So let's look back at the previous games. For instance, Persona 3 FES. that was an extended re-release of the original Persona 3. And looking at the sequels, i.e. the Persona 4 Arena games, it is pretty clear that that's the canon version. So, with certain things like, I guess, having the wild card, or at least she's implied to have the wild card. I don't know, they're kind of weird about that whole thing. But in other ways, it is very obvious that the answer still very much took place, because I'm pretty sure there's like dialogue that references the fight all the characters have. That is the canon version of the game. Then there's also Persona 4 Golden, which I think is actually the most interesting case here. Persona 4 Golden is actually in a very similar situation to Persona 5 Royal. It came out around the same time as a spin-off that continued the story, in this case being Persona 4 Arena. Now, in this case, I'm not sure which game actually came out first. Arena may have come out first, but that doesn't really change my point here. My point is that it's the same general situation. Persona 4 Golden was an expanded re-release of the original Persona 4, adding a lot of the same stuff that Royal does, where, you know, new character, new social links, an entire new dungeon, a lot of new stuff. A lot of quality of life improvements, a lot of different stuff. It's generally a pretty similar re-release, all things considered. And it's in a very similar situation, because Persona 4 Arena, which was marketed as the action sequel to the turn-based classic, or some shit, I'm pretty sure I saw something like that in the back of my Arena copy, I don't fucking know. But that was the general marketing for the game, so it was marketed as a sequel. Yet it does not reference Golden at all. There is not a single reference, not a character, not a mention of a plot detail at all for Persona 4 Golden in Persona 4 Arena. So I wasn't around in the Persona community back then. For those who don't know, I've only really been a Persona fan since like August 2021 maybe. So I wasn't around back then, obviously. But I have to imagine, like, did something like this happen back then too? Or was it just the out of context statement that made people think about this? I don't really know. But what's funny is that Persona 4 Arena actually ended up getting a sequel called Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. Yes, it's a sequel, not a re-release. I don't know why people think it's a re-release, considering the original story wasn't even in the Ultimax to begin with. It was actually DLC originally. But that's not what we're here to talk about. In its sequel, it actually does reference Golden, with Marie showing up and... Okay, well that's about it. But the point is, it does at least acknowledge that Golden is indeed a thing. So Arena, despite not referencing Persona 4 Golden, is still canon to it. That is crucial. It does not reference Persona 4 Golden at all, yet it does still take place in the same timeline. So why people are so caught up on the fact that Persona 5 Strikers doesn't reference Royal in the slightest is so weird to me. Like, they don't have to reference previous events. People bring up the fact that Sumire and Maruki are never mentioned, but do you know who else is never mentioned in Strikers? Akechi. And do you know who else isn't mentioned? Damn near every optional confidant in the fucking game. The only ones that get mentioned are Sojiro, who, you know, is actually in the game, Takemi, because you try to go to her store, and Iwai, for the same reason. None of the other ones are mentioned, to my knowledge. I don't even think Mishima is mentioned. And, you know, Mishima was kind of an important character in Persona 5. So, if they're not going to reference all of these characters, especially Akechi, who, you know, was literally a fucking party member and arguably the main villain of the original game, then why is it so far-fetched for them not to mention Sumire or Maruki? Like, they don't even reference most of the villains from the original game. I think Kamoshida, Madarame, and Shido were mentioned, but I don't think any of the others are. Well, aside from Sai, obviously, and Futaba, but those two are exceptions. So I don't see why people find that so far-fetched. Another thing people are caught up on is that Sumire isn't there. People think, well, if Sumire is a member of the Phantom Thieves, surely she would go on the road trip with them. We've been talking a lot about misconceptions in this video, and here we have yet another one. So, for those who haven't played Persona 5 Royal, well, first off, why the fuck have you watched this far into the video? I literally gave you a warning at the start that there was going to be spoilers for Royal. Why are you still here? But regardless, in Persona 5 Royal, Sumire, then going by Kasumi, tells you that she does not agree with the Phantom Thieves' methods, and then later on in the game, joins the Phantom Thieves temporarily to help take down Maruki. That is the entire story. Sumire never actually joins the Phantom Thieves officially. Even after the palace is completed, they have a conversation about how her her views are different from the Phantom Thieves. That literally, that's a conversation they actually have in LeBlanc after Monarchy's Palace is finished. So Sumire was less a member of the Phantom Thieves and more so helping out because, well, I mean, if you're living in a false world and you know that your friend and, you know, love interest are fighting to end it, are you really just going to sit there and not help them? Especially when you're very much involved in the whole thing. Not to mention that Sumire was never really friends with any of the Phantom Thieves. Like, think about it. The main 8 Phantom Thieves, like, that's Ren all the way through to Haru, are a pretty tightly knit friend group. That's made pretty clear in pretty much all games involving the Persona 5 cast. Akechi and Sumire, more focusing on Sumire here, are kind of outliers because they were only really friends with Ren. Like, that was really it. Akechi can't fucking stand the rest of the Phantom Thieves. He can barely stand Ren, for fuck's sake. And Sumire barely interacts with the rest of the cast. Like, I can think of, like, 1 conversation she has with Ryuji and, like, 2 conversations she has with Futaba, and that's, like, it. Like, she doesn't really have that many memorable interactions with the rest of the cast, and she never really grows to have a bond with them. She was just there to help out Ren, really, because, you know, she's in love with him. So, well, that and the reason I stated before, but you got the point. So, in other words, why would Sumire go on a road trip with Ren's friends? The only person she's really friends with her, is, as I say, is Ren, and, like, maybe she knows Morgana, but, like, that was more of an acquaintance relationship, if you know what I mean. So, that, from a plot standpoint, doesn't really make any sense. Not to mention, a lot of people have said that she may just be on a gymnastics trip or something, considering she does go abroad a lot from gymnastics, so that's also a possibility, but honestly, I don't even think that's it. I think they just didn't invite her because she's not really part of their friend group. I think that's pretty simple. I don't really think that's that hard to understand. It would be like if they randomly invited Mishima. Like, sure, you helped us, but, like, does he really know anyone except Ren, Ryuji, and Ann? I don't think so. Doesn't really make any sense in that case. It's kind of the same situation with Sumire. But, before I end this video, I feel like I've given enough evidence as it is for now. But before I end this video, there is one more thing I want to mention. And that's that apparently, now I can't confirm this for myself for obvious reasons, but I've heard this way too many times online for me to just completely dismiss it. Apparently in the Japanese version of Strikers, aka Persona 5 Scramble, the Phantom Strikers, there is a reference to Royal. Now, I've heard conflicting reports as to what this reference is. I've heard some people say that it's a reference to the Final Palace. I've heard some people say it's a reference to Sumire being away. But the only time I've ever heard somebody actually quote it specifically is apparently they mention the palace we did back in February. That's the closest thing to an actual quote of this line I can find online. I can find people bringing it up everywhere, but that's the closest thing to an actual quote I can find, is the palace we did back in February. Now, in Persona 5 Vanilla, the one that came out on the PS3, they were already done with all the Phantom Thief stuff by February. The Final Palace is wrapped up on December 24th. So it wouldn't really make any sense for them to reference a palace they did in February if they were already done with that by then. However, if you take Persona 5 Royal into account, then that makes perfect sense. Sure, the majority of Monarchy's Palace is done in January, but the final boss itself is done in the early days of February. And to be honest, there's actually a lot more stuff I could come up with that's even in the English version that kind of supports Strikers being more of a sequel to Royal. Not directly, but it kind of helps. For example, everybody acts like they haven't seen each other in a long-ass time, not just Ren. I get the vibe that they all haven't seen each other in a long time, which, from the original P5's ending, doesn't really work, considering the final shot was just them going on one last road trip together, where in Royal's ending, they all go their separate ways. Anne goes to study abroad, Ryuji moves away so he can live closer to your rehab facility. Fucking Makoto and Haru go off to college. There's a lot of shit that goes on. They all go their separate ways. The only ones here still living in Tokyo are Yusuke and Futaba. And to further support this, and Ryuji and Futaba all act like they haven't seen each other in ages as well, despite the fact that if this was following on from the original game story, they would all go to the same school, since Futaba presumably goes to Shujin, considering in the dancing game there's DLC to give her Shujin outfit, and, you know, that screenshot from the marquee ending, it's pretty clear the school she ends up going to is Shujin Academy. So in Strikers, when Futaba references going into school, she's more than likely talking about Shujin. So these three characters would be going to school together. So why the fuck would they act like they haven't seen each other in a long ass time? Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, does it? And that fits way better with Royal's ending, in my opinion. Not to mention that, as I already mentioned, the ending of the original Persona 5 is them going on a road trip together. Yet whenever the opportunity to go on a road trip in Striker comes up, they're all ecstatic about it. I think if they already went on a huge road trip, you know, bringing Ren home at the end of Vanilla P5, they would be a lot less ecstatic about that possibility. Now, obviously, that last one's a little bit, you know, that last one's a little bit debatable, but I think all that other evidence, well, the last two really, are a little bit more debatable, but I think all that other evidence makes it pretty clear that there's nothing stopping these two games from taking place in the same timeline. All the Royal characters have a reason not to be there. You know, Maruki is just a fucking taxi driver now. I already brought up a million reasons for Sumire, and Akachi is either dead or pretending to be dead. Yeah, I don't really know what Akachi's situation is like, but considering we didn't get Persona 6 announced at that concert, I think it's pretty safe to say they're not done with P5 yet, so I assume we'll get the answer soon. If we don't, then what the fuck? But yeah, there's very clear reasons for everyone not to be there. And as I said, Atlas never actually said the games weren't canon in the first place. Not to mention that they've continued to, you know, promote Royal as the definitive version of the game. Because what I find really, really funny is that people aren't saying that Strikers isn't canon. Most people are saying that Royal isn't canon, which, I hate to break it to you, but if one of them isn't going to be canon, it's gonna be Strikers. Like, if Atlas came out tomorrow and, like, literally stated these two games take place in separate timelines, and they announced Persona 5 Arena, like, the next day, yeah, no, the one it would be following on from is Royal, because Royal's a mainline game, and Strikers is a spin-off. Well, I mean, technically, Royal is a part of a spin-off series of Megami. You get the fucking point. It's a mainline Persona game. So, yeah, I hate to break it to you, but if Royal would be the canon one if they had to pick. But as I say, I think it's pretty safe to say they can both be canon. So, yeah. I just wanted to make this video because I've always been so dissatisfied with my first video, and I feel like I have gotten better at making videos since then. So, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. Leave a comment in the comment section below telling me if you've played the Japanese version, and if you can clarify that line that's supposedly in the Japanese version. I can't confirm it for myself because I don't speak Japanese, so, you know, I'm kind of useless in that regard. But if you have played that version and can clarify, please let me know. I would love to know. I've literally been wanting to know about that since the day I first heard it. And also telling me your opinions on this whole situation. Please be civil, though. I am not in the mood for... Oh god, after the fucking video I made on the whole Snapcube situation, I am not in the goddamn mood to deal with drama again. Holy fucking shit. But anyway, you know, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.